Welcome back, everybody, to the continuation of our Great Minds in Philosophy series. This lesson specifically is continuing looking at Kant, Immanuel Kant, and all of his various contributions to philosophy. So far, we've spent the majority of our lessons talking about what are arguably conceived to be the most important contributions to philosophy on the part of Immanuel Kant. That being, firstly, his idea of transcendental idealism and his ideas related to metaphysics and epistemology, generally conceived of in one of his most important works, arguably his magnum opus, A Critique of Pure Reason. And then we also started talking about his contributions to moral philosophy, talking first about the foundations of his moral philosophy, the idea that it comes out of a sense of duty and deontology, and then talking about how Kant formalizes and formulates his moral philosophy, how he comes to conclusions about his moral philosophy using what he describes as the categorical imperative. This lesson isn't necessarily going to go too far away from his moral philosophy because we're going to be engaging in a little bit of political philosophy. Now, the reason why I say that is because some people actually argue that political philosophy is less a category of philosophy in and of itself, and it is more of just a category of moral philosophy, applied ethics, applied moral philosophy. Essentially, what it involves doing is looking at what are the best ways in which we can construct a society, construct a state, construct a justice system, and construct all of these different things in order to make a moral and just society. So in that sense, it is a bit like we're doing some more applied ethics. But deeper than looking just at political philosophy, we're also going to spend a little bit of time focusing specifically on a Kantian theory and a Kantian conception of justice. So this is the final set of lessons looking at Immanuel Kant. And this final set of lessons looking at Immanuel Kant is going to be looking at the contributions to Kantian political philosophy, how he contributed to political philosophy through his writings. Now, as I mentioned, this is just going to be an introductory series of lessons on the philosophy of Immanuel Kant, essentially highlighting the great minds in philosophy. You vote on who is going to be next in the series out of a list, which I'll construct later on. And just like with the Rawls lessons, we've not covered everything. We've not covered everything in the kind of detail that you might get from other places, but we have at the very least done an overview and spent a lot of time thinking about the most key and important contributions that these philosophers actually make to philosophy itself. So we're going to be talking about the ideas relating to not only justice, but also the idea of law, and how law and justice contribute to a Kantian political theory. So beginning first then, let's think about Kant's political philosophy, okay? So these kinds of contributions to political philosophy are somewhat influential, but what most importantly is stated here is that they deeply intertwine with the moral philosophy of Immanuel Kant. And of course, they deeply intertwine with his broader philosophical system. So his political philosophy is deeply linked to his moral philosophy. So you should really be thinking back to those couple of lessons that we just did, looking at Kantian perspectives on deontology and duty, as well as Kantian perspectives in relation to the categorical imperative. His political thought focuses on the concepts of justice, as well as the concept of liberty, but most importantly, the ways in which reason factors into these kinds of political institutions, okay? So let's think about this then. Let's actually think about how Kant constructs his political philosophy and constructs a sense of justice in his philosophy. And I want to firstly highlight the importance that Kant places on the idea of autonomy and freedom. This is something that we noted in the previous lesson when we looked at the third formulation of his categorical imperative. We noted that this essentially invites us to examine a hypothetical world in which we have a perfect moral community, the kingdom of ends, as he described it. And in the kingdom of ends, the autonomy, freedom, and dignity of all people as rational agents are respected. This ties into the second formulation of the categorical imperative, the formulation which describes a state of affairs in which you ought not to treat an individual as a means to an end, but only as an end in themselves. So central, therefore, to Kant's political philosophy is this concept of autonomy, which essentially, according to Kant, is the capacity to govern oneself according to rational principles. People are rational agents, according to Kant. And so when you are able to and have the capacity to govern yourself according to your rationality and according to your rational principles, you are essentially acting in a way which is autonomous. So for Kant, a just political system, a political system which essentially enshrines a sense of justice, is one that respects and promotes individual autonomy. And because it does that, it allows people to act according to their own rational will, and they are also able to respect that very same right and that very same principle when we look at others. So again, you are able to expressly and autonomously be able to act according to your rational will, but in accordance with the second maxim, of the categorical imperative, you also should be expected to respect the right of others, to not treat others as a means to an end, but to treat others as ends in themselves. And it is from here, that we get that justice requires treating individuals as ends in themselves and not merely as an end. So Kant essentially, rather than formulates his own separate theory of justice that is distinct from his ethical theories, just like a bit like how Rawls would from our previous set of lessons on great minds. The theory of justice in a Kantian sense is one that is, as I mentioned earlier, deeply interwoven with the ideas of individuals not being treated as ends as a means to an end, but as ends in themselves, which is his ethics. This is his normative ethical theory. This is his categorical imperative. It is consistent with his moral philosophy. And the foundations of his moral philosophy, as we've noted in previous lessons on Immanuel Kant, but also as we have noted in our lessons on normative ethics, the foundations of his moral philosophy is the moral will, which is derived out of a respect for individual autonomy and the idea of dignity of individuals. Justice, therefore, involves creating laws and institutions that respect these principles and protect individual freedoms.